The CEO of the company behind ChatGPT will testify before Congress today. A Senate Judiciary Subcommittee will discuss the oversight of artificial intelligence to gain a better understanding of the risks posed by the technology. This as officials attempt to crack down on the spread of misinformation and ensure consumers' privacy. Joining us now, former CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos. He's an NBC News security and intelligence analyst and professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University. Dan Ariely, he's the author of the book entitled The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. It's good to have you both.
Thank you guys for being with us. Dan, you know, it seems that many in the media, many in politics for the past 8 years have been trying to figure out how to push back on disinformation. When I go to Washington, I've talked to Democrats on both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue throughout that time. They've been just absolutely dumbfounded as to how to respond to these fire hose of falsehoods. And now, with AI, the pace is only quickening. So what's the answer? What is the truth about disinformation, and how do we fight it?
So first of all, I think we do need to understand the problem. And if we think about what you said earlier about Trump in a particular case, when Trump was running originally for elections, we were all surprised by how many things he was saying that were not truth. And I started looking at it at the time because it looked like he was saying all these things that were not truth. Democrats were outraged, and Republicans didn't seem to matter so much, didn't seem to care so much. And I looked into it, and what I found was that Republicans wanted a leader that would lie. Now, what I don't mean that they want a liar, but they wanted somebody who would show loyalty to their team. They wanted a dirty player who would get their agenda up. When Trump won, this was a very ideological elections. People on the left wanted things, people on the right wanted things, and basically the people who were Trump supporters, many of them said, I know the guy is unethical, but he's such an unethical guy that when he gets to power, he will make sure that our agenda is being carried over, and the ends justify the means. It's perfectly fine to be slightly to shade things because we have things that are right now more. Later, maybe we'll go back to the truth, but right now, this is more important. And in the last few years,
Mark. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Finish up.
No, it's fine. And in the last few years, things have been much more ideological. If you look at the Republicans who still say that Trump won the most recent election, some of them are saying it, not really believing it, but saying it as a stamp of loyalty. If I say something so extreme that is not true, then I'm signaling my loyalty to the group, that I'm really part of this.
So, Mark, let's talk a little further about the dangers here of this misinformation or disinformation, and particularly when it comes to AI. We've already seen some of the deep fakes that are out there that are, I would say at this point, they're like 90% of the way there. A careful study, you can usually tell if it's not quite right, but the technology is improving so quickly, it's going to be a matter of time before they are spot on. And who knows what they can depict, let's just say, a political rival saying or doing, or, you know, that could be very, very damaging and used for great harm. What is your level of concern that we may be at that era sooner than perhaps we expected?
Sure, Jonathan. So I think with AI, you know, we are at a place where there is tremendous positives that can come from this. Think about it in the national security and intelligence spheres, where you have things like artificial intelligence and algorithms that can help us with logistics, that can talk about maintenance of systems. When you think about intelligence, you think about, you know, this collection of data, algorithms that can help us analyze, for example, imagery from across the world. So really positives, but then there's the negatives. And the deep fakes, I think, is something that we should worry about both internationally and at home here. And I think on the international side, look, you're going to see our adversaries use deep fakes. China has a mass a program on AI. So what happens if China and Russia as well in their disinformation campaigns start using AI to promulgate themes inside this country? And of course, what happens inside the United States as well? So huge concern. I think back to my time at CIA, where we were battling Russian disinformation, particularly in Europe. And the mantra we had was, the truth is going to be our superpower. And so you have to have a war room mentality, whether it's a political campaign in the United States battling disinformation or, the CIA, the NSA, the U.S. intelligence community battling the Russians and the Chinese. You have to have a war room mentality to push out the truth almost in real time when you see this coming at you. That's hard. That takes a lot of time, effort, and money. But without that, we're going to lose. And so, it's something, again, of huge concern, I think, in the national security sphere. And you're going to see on Congress a lot of people talking about this. There's committees all over the place now looking at AI and both, again, the positives and the negatives. Big issue for us.
Dan, Mark there is talking about what governments and institutions can do to battle misinformation, but you've also found research on what individuals can do. I mean, it seems completely terrifying, and throw in the mix of AI, the potential impact of this on voters and the way we vote in our political systems seems sort of almost, I think, out of people's control. But you suggest there are ways that we can combat misinformation on an individual level.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that the individual level is the most frightening one. Because imagine a technology that identify your informational needs, identify your psychological state, and say what information would give you comfort while also giving you false information, right? It's almost like designing a virus that would fit our cognitive system in the best way. And by the way, fake news can always be more interesting than the real news, right? The moment you have the creativity to do whatever you want, then it's important. So what are the mechanisms? One of them is called pre-bunking, where the idea is that when people consume fake news, it's already too late. The moment we've consumed it, we have a very hard time separating truth or fact, and from there on we can deteriorate, because once something becomes part of our cognitive structure, it's very hard for us to change it. So think about pre-bunking. How do we educate people in advance to be more concerned, more worried, test things more deeply, and especially not spread it? If people spread information without thinking, then it creates, every time I put something online, it puts my reputation on top of that information, and then it becomes more logical. So that's one. The second thing is that one of the main reasons, if you think about what's happening in American politics, if you think about the chase after fake information, a lot of it comes out of stress. When the world seems that it's not going very well, that something is against me, that I'm feeling hard done by, we all look for somebody else to blame. We don't want to say, oh, it's my fault. We want to find somebody else to blame, and therefore we look for that. So things like inequality, things like a lower level of education, think about uncertainty and trust. All of those create fertile ground for people to start going after fake news. And then we have the internet information bubble. Right? The social factors are basically what seals fake news. You go and you become friends with people who believe the same beliefs that you do. You turn off the world outside of that, and then it's very, very hard to change people after that.
Mark, it is extraordinary. The educated people, Willie and I talk about it all the time, the educated people that we know with advanced degrees that will spread the craziest conspiracy theories that they know to be false. They know them to be false. There's so many people that will go on a Chinese religious cult's website to read their favorite conspiracy theories. Even when you tell them, you realize it's a Chinese religious cult's website that they're putting out to reach Americans. And they tried being left wing, and it wasn't as sticky as it was when they shifted to being a right wing conspiracy. And even when you tell educated people with advanced degrees that, they lap it up and they share this information when they don't believe it. They know it's not true, but it appeals to their pre-existing prejudices. I mean, that is pretty damning and pretty difficult habit to break when democracies such as ours depend on the truth and depend on shared truths.
Joe, you're right. So, you and I share some mutual friends, in fact, who have some kind of political beliefs that I think have shifted and really are in these information bubbles. I was at a high school baseball game a couple nights ago, and I sat down with a really good friend of mine who's really smart. He's a military officer, and he looked at me and he said, "Oof, really tough about that Biden crime family." And I turned around and I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, you saw everything on the news. There's smoke there." And I said, "You can't really believe this." Now, this was, of course, before the famous, Red October incident with Representative Comer, when it looks like there is no, witness or informants. But I thought a lot about that afterwards, and I chose that day at the high school baseball game to get into a pretty heated argument about it. I pushed back, and I think that's something. There's a lesson for everyone here, because people do live in these information bubbles. But you got to push back when there's kind of nonsense. You have to take the time to kind of dissect people's arguments.